Good evening. Rabbi Wolper is here. Today we're going to be learning, starting a new parak. This is parak Elu Ovrin. Even on these very first two words, Big Machlokas, Rashi, and Tosfos, what is it exactly that we're talking about? We're going to be following within the path of Rashi. But before that, we're starting on the bottom of Mem Beis Amud Aleph, and we'll be finishing in Yirtzeh Hashem toward the bottom of Mem Gimel Amud Beis. We will have time to spare in Yirtzeh Hashem. And let's get started with the new Mishnah, new parak. Ve'elu Ovrin b'Pesach. Rashi says right here, first Rashi, Ve'elu Ovrin alehen b'Bal Yiro Bal Yimatzeh. Tosfos has a different shita, but these are the things that you will violate Bal Yiro Bal Yimatzeh with. What are they? They are Kuta Chabavli, as we've spoken about before. Kuta Chabavli is a dip that has milk in it. V'Sheichar Hamadi, this is a type of beer. V'Chometz Ha'adomi, a certain type of vinegar. V'Zeisum HaMitzri, we'll get into what this is in the Gemara today. V'Zuman Shal Tzvayim, this is a liquid that was used for dyeing. V'Amilan Shal Tabachim, some type of flour thing that Tabachim use. Again, we'll get into this in the Gemara. V'Kolan Shal Svarim, a certain type of glue that people who would make books, that's what they would use as well. And then the Gemara continues, the Mishnah continues. Rabbi Eliezer, Av Tachshite Nashim, what does that mean? Jewelry. When we were little kids, they used to take the elbow noodles. You'd put a little rope through it. Is that Cheerios? Exactly. So at least the Chol HaPachos Cheerios are actually edible, So maybe we'd have to say that maybe we're talking about women's jewelry that's inedible. So we'll see in the Gemara what that means. Zehakla. Here are the guidelines of how we should look at chametz. And the Gemara says as follows. The Mishnah says as follows. Kol shemimin dagan areze over b'Pesach. Anything that's made out of min dagan, browse, barley, rye, oat, wheat, spelt, that is going to be over on Pesach by Rabbi Yimatzeh. If you eat it, you're chayav kares v'chule. However, hare elu, the ones in our Mishnah, the elu, quote unquote, of our Mishnah, that is be'azhara. Azhara is a code word for an isser lav, an isser doraisa in the Torah. Ve'ein b'hem mishum kares. If there is some type of mixture, so then it's not going to be an isser kares. We're going to spend a fair amount of time today discussing chametz that is not chametz gamur plain, but it is actually in mixture form, or chametz noksha, or nuksha, depending on how you pronounce it, which would be chametz that is potentially inedible. But first, let's start with a couple of things off of the beginning of our Mishnah. Tanu Rabbanan, the Gemara opens bottom of Mem Beis Amud Aleph. The Gemara says, Tanu Rabbanan, Shlosha Dvarim Ne'amar be'Kuta Chabavli. There are three things that are said about Kuta Chabavli, about this dip. Number one, Metamtem Esalev, it's bad for your heart. Umisam Esaynaim, it makes a person blind. Umakresh Esaguf, and it makes your body weak. How do all three of these things play out? Metamtem Esalev, Mishum Nisyuve Dechalva. Rashi here says it's the Mei Chalav, the liquid that separates from the actual milk itself. It's that white separation. If you've ever left out a gallon of milk in your house, or if you leave out a milkshake from somewhere, you'll see that there's a separation of liquids. So that's nisyuve dechalva. They would use a salt in there that would be blinding. Of course, we know this is melach sodomis. Melach sodomis is a type of salt that we seem to not have access to, but it was the reason as to why we have our starting minhag for washing mayim achronim. Again, a diyun today, nowadays within the Ramah, is there still an obligation to do so? Ayin sham. So that's what the salt does. How does it mess up with the body? So it says, Mishum kumnisa de'uma. What's kumnisa de'uma? Rashi says 2 lines from the bottom, ipusha, it's mold. So the mold is bad for your body. Tanu Rabbanan Gimel Dvarim Marben Hazevel. There are three things that makes a person go to the bathroom more. V'kofin esakoman is bad for their posture. It takes 1/500th of a person's brightness in their eyes. Eluhain, here's what they are. Pas kiber, it's bread that's made from unrefined flour. V'sheichar chadash, new beer. V'yarakai, and raw vegetables. Rashi, what does raw vegetables mean? Vegetables should be good for you. So Rashi says we're not talking about regular, cucumbers. We're not talking about the regular things. We're talking about, says Rashi, you go krishan leeks of itzalim, onions, v'chazar, and this is chazeres, like we saw, like the bitter herbs. Those, kshe'ochel man harbe tamid, when you eat a lot of them on the regular, then they are bad for you. Otherwise, they are not bad for you. Tanu Rabbanan, 3 lines from the bottom, shlosh dvarim ma'atin es hazevel. There are 3 things that minimize the amount that one would go to the bathroom. V'zokven es ha'koman is good for posture. Meir and sainaim, it makes the eyes brighter. Elohein pas nakia, eating clean bread. Basar shamein, eating fatty meat. The yayin yashan, and old wine. Sounds like quite the diet. Good bread, good meat, and good wine. Pas nakia desmida. What does that mean? Desmida. Rashi says desmida solas is it's refined. Very well, what's the word I'm looking for? Filtered, not filtered, sifted. Very, very nicely sifted and finely ground up flour. Basar shamin, what kind of animal are we talking about here? The tzvirta delo eftach. It's an aiz. Look at Rashi, top line, the tzvirta delo eftach, aiz shelo yalda. It's a pregnant animal, shelo yalda, and the animal has more fat on the body. And under those circumstances, that animal is considered a basar shamin. It's good for you. Also, just as a side note, this is what we would call a ben pakua. If you shecht an animal while the animal is pregnant, then the animal inside doesn't require shechita. Okay, so this animal's pregnant with a baby, and if you shech the mother, then the animal inside does not require any form of shchita, so it would be just a perk of this type of animal that one would be eating. Yayin, what's about the yayin? Yashin atik atiki, it's very old. Rashi, what does atik atiki mean? Top line, turning to the second line, Yashin shel shalosh shanim, 3 years old. They clearly didn't have the same amount of old wines that we have. Kol mili demali, as a general rule, says the Gemara, Membeis, says the Gemara, Kol mili demali lahai, kasha lahai. Usually, when you eat a food, it has a plus on one side and a minus on another. Udekasha lahai, mali lahai, it has a minus on one side, it's a plus on the other, except for a few things. Bar mizan gibila retiva, except for moist ginger, upilpale arichta, long peppers, upas nikia, and very good bread, ubasar shamen, fattening meat, v'yayin yashan, old wine, demale lekule gufe. If you're looking for a marim makom, this is it. Should eat fatty meat, very good. This is exactly what the Gemara says that it's good for you. I don't know that they had the same studies of cholesterol and arteries and triglycerides that we now have. Don't rely on this without speaking to your doctor. But this is what the Gemara says is things that are not bad for you. The Mishnah referred to Sheikhar Hamadi. What does that mean? To Ramu Bey Me Sare. They added into this beer the liquids of sare, the liquids of barley that was soaked in water. They added that to the drink. What's the vinegar? The Shadu Bey Sare. Here too, they added in the barley into the chometz. Amar Rav Nachman. This is a historical piece. The Gemara says, Bitchila. What does Bitchila mean? Take a look at Rashi just to our left. Bitchila. Kshebeis Mikdash Kayam. When the base of Mikdash was still built, they would bring the nesach and the wines from the Chelek of Eretz Yisrael where Yehuda was. It was a nace. The wine never became machmas, it never became vinegary. Back in the Gemara, it would never go bad until you would add barley. That was when they wanted to then finally make it into a vinegar. They were done drinking it, they weren't going to use it anymore, or whatever the case was. The only way to make it bad was by adding barley. That's when they would call it chometz tam. However, now that the base of Mikdash is charev, so then, ein yonim shel edomim, the enemies. Ein yonim shel edomiyim, machmetz ashenos l'sochen. They're the ones who get the good wine until we add seor mekor noso chometz ha'edomi. That's the chometz ha'edomi of our Mishnah, which is this wine that never went bad for the edomiyim. Why did it never go bad? Because the kaim mashnemar imaleah charava im melea zu charava zu. If one nation is filled, the other will be desolate. Imaleah zu charava zu. And if one is filled, the other will be desolate. We'll always have an inverse relationship with Edom. So when the base of Mikdash was kaim, there was a nace that our wine never went bad. Once the churban took place, then there was a nace that their wine never went bad to fulfill that pasuk of Nachman bar Yitzchak Amar mehachal ulom milaom yamat, that we learn the same yesod but from a different pasuk. Tanya, the Brisa writes about 1/3 of the way down and Bezim and Bez. Amar Yehuda, Barishona halokeh chometz me'am haaretz. If a person were to buy vinegar from someone who is Jewish but not observant in all of the laws, eino tzarach la'aser. You don't have to give meiser on that. You can assume that the person did meiser mibnei shechazaka eino ba'el min temed. Not because we trust the person, but because it's from temed. Temed is some type of very watered down. Take a look at Rashi right here to the left. Your rascal temed. He says lefi shehayayin haya tov ve'eno machmitz v'stam chometz shelahem min temed hayaba. It came from some derivative, but it was not really wine. So he says, don't worry about it. You don't have to give meiser in that case because it's not really wine. It's temed. It's something else. It's like a beer type of drink. It's with a wine base, but it's not considered yain. Ve'achshav with the churban halokech chometz min halokech chometz me'am haaretz tzarech la'aser shechazkaso eno ba ela min hayayin. With the churban base of Mikdash, we assume that from an am haaretz that we do have to do meiser. So says the Gemara asking a kasha of the Sava Rabbi Yehuda Temed La Bari Surahu. It seems from the Reisha, from the beginning of that case, that it was not a Bari Surah, that you don't have to give Meiser on Temed. Why not? V'hatanya, the Brisa writes, Hamas made one who makes Temed, v'nasan mayim b'mida. You put in a specific measure of water. Umatza kadei midah. So pater, that if there's a high ratio of water, so then you're exempt. Rabbi Yehuda Mechayev. Why does Rabbi Yehuda say you're Mechayev? Take a look at Rashi to the left, 2 inches down, deeper Maseches Rabbi Yehuda Mechayev. De'azol basar chazuz v'taima. If it looks like wine and if it tastes like wine, then it's wine. And you're obligated to give meiser under those circumstances. Rabbi Yehuda didn't care about the ratios as much as he cared about what it looked like and what it tastes like. We know the dina, we don't paskin that way. If you water down your grape juice too much, it's no longer grape juice, it becomes a shehakol. Then it's grape drink. That's not the same thing. If you water it down too much, you're not allowed. So back in the day, when they drank wine that was undiluted, they would dilute to a specific ratio to make sure it was still borei priagov. And you have to be careful. So a few weeks ago, this happened. I had a little bit of bartanura left. I put it in a cup for Abdallah. And one of my kids was being very nice, and they filled up the rest with water. Now, I don't remember all the ratios offhand, but my cup was like half filled with Bartanur. And I'm like, okay, so that didn't work. So I make Havdalah on something else. But here, what we're talking about is that this was temed, and he said, I don't understand. If you have the temed and it still tastes that way and it still looks like wine, so he's mechayiv. So that shows you the Rabbi Yehuda holds that you are chayiv in meiser with temed. Answers the Gemara, 2 answers. Almost halfway down. Hachi kamar lo nechshedu amei haaretz ala temed. One answer is that amei haaretz will never release temed from their hands that is not yet me'usar. Yes, Rabbi Yehuda is makbid on meiser. However, it doesn't apply here because it's temed, and an am haaretz is not choshed on that. He's always going to give meiser before he gets it out of his property, even by temed. But some argue, no, nechshedu. Really, we are concerned that they're not going to do a good job. Velokasha, there's 2 types of temed. Ha bidiravaka, ha dibipurtsani. So there's 2 different kinds. Rashi dibra hamaschil, 4 inches down from where we are, 2/3 of the way down. Dibra maschil v'ibaisema nechshadu. If you look through there, a few lines down, it says uvetemed dipurtsani kamar shenosen mayim bechartzanen v'hu machmetzu martiach la'achar zman keyayin hatoses v'hainu temed v'lesbe ela kiyuha depira. It just has this faint sense of what the fruit actually looked like. That's the first word. That's the second word actually. Rashi explains them backwards. Rashi probably had the girsa reversed in his Gemara, which is why he explains Purtzani before he explains Rivaka. Either way, the first one is where you are chayiv, where Rabbi Yehuda would say that you are chayiv in Meiser, and the second one is where you are not. Halfway down, what is V'zeisum HaMitzri? We had this Maseches Shabbos actually, a couple of times, I believe. What's V'zeisum HaMitzri? My Zeisum HaMitzri says the Gemara, Tani Rabbi Yosef Tilsa Sari, it's 1/3 barley, Tilsa Kortimi, 1/3 saffron, Tilsa Milcha, 1/3 salt. Rav Papa Mafik Sare, he removed the ingredient of Sari when he would make Zeisum HaMitzri, Mar Lechitin, he would put in wheat. The Simanech, but that's not it. The Simanech Sisni with the Samech sound, with the sin sound to remind us that it's actually Sari. That's how Rashi here explains. So what would they do with this? Taru, taf and shin, sharu, from the word shora, they would soak it. The kalu lahu, then they would toast it. The tachne lahu, they would grind it up. The shasule, mi divcha ve'adat zarta, from the divcha, from the zevach, from the time of the korban Pesach, from Pesach to Atzeres, from Pesach till Shavuos. Now, it actually had some medical benefits, but one should be careful. To kamit mirafile, if a person was blocked up, it would loosen them up with the rafi. If a person was not blocked up, they were very loose, then mekamit le would regulate them. But lecholo lisha ubra, if a person was sick or if a woman was pregnant, so then sakanta, then one should be careful not to eat it. Then the zeisum HaMitzri would be considered to be dangerous. What is vizoman shel tzivayim? What was this liquid that was used for those who were dying that our Mishnah quotes? Says Gemara, hacha targimu maya dechiri ditzava behu liba. This is what it was a liquid that was used hacha in Bavel. Here in Bavel, targimu they translate as maya dechiri ditzava behu liba. They would use this to dye leathers red. That was what they were using for this liquid. So that's what the Mishnah is referencing. It had some type of flour in it. What was ve'amilan shel tavachim? 2/3 of the way down. Pas tvua shelo hevia shlish. This was the grains that were only 1/3 developed. They were totally not ready for being used for bread. What were they used for? They would be put on the top of the food, and it would draw in some of the impurities, some of the things that were dirty from within the water. That's the zuma. It would draw it out. That was the use, and that's what made the cut into our Mishnah as things that might be problematic. The kolan shel svarim. What is the kolan shel svarim? Says the Gemara. Hacha here in Bavel tirguma perura de ushkefi. What is perura de ushkefi? Take a look at Rashi. Where is this Rashi? Rashi is about 10 lines from the bottom of the page. Dibur hamasil, 5 lines into the thick lines. Dibur maskal pirura deishkafe, glued, it says here. It's glue. What does he say? The haritzanim, those who worked with leather, madbikin boes haor, they'd stick the glue together with this. Kishem ischalek l'shtayim, it would either, when the glue would split into front half and back half. We actually know about this from the halachos of Hilchos Stam of Sefer Torah Mezuzos, that there were 2 sides of the cloth, and if it would fall apart, they would glue it together. Oh, midavkin shtei oros yachad lasosan ava, or you can take 2 layers of the leather and make them thicker. Lasosan ava. The darchan lases bokemach shel shifon. They would use this special type of glue. So that's what's going on here in the Gemara. So the Gemara says they were talking about a glue for people who do leather. Rabbi Simi argues. Rabbi Simi michuzna. He says no, it's actually something else. Amar zeti pulan shel benos hashirim. Actually, what this was. What was listed in the Gemara is kolan shel svarim. The pirura de ushkefi. What was that? He says it was this thing that the richer, the wealthier families would use. Benos ashirin. They would use it shemashiris also the benos anim. They would use it to remove hair on their body, and then people would use the leftovers. Not such an appealing thing to use, but that's what they would do. Amy, is this really true that that's what it means? About Tana Rabbi Chia arba mine Medina. There are 4 references to things which are commonplace in the Medina in our Mishnah. Those 4 things are what we start with. Those are the 4 things listed in our Mishnah, the 4 things that were Medina. And shlosha mine umnus, and 3 from 3 professions. What were those 3 things? It was tzevayim, and tabachim, and sofrim. So that's what our Mishnah references, 4 standards in the community from 3 professions. If our Mishnah, when it's talking about pirura de ushkefi, if you say that this isn't really glue, but it's this type of material that the wealthier community would use and then give it to the poor community when they were done, then my meaning umnasnika, then how does it fit into our Mishnah as it relates to the umnios? There were only 3 umnios, and this isn't one of them. Says the Gemara, Belamai, pirura de ushkefi, it really is glue. Amai karu lehai kolan shel svarim. But if that's the case, then why does it say kolan shel svarim? Our Mishnah said kolan shel svarim. If you look at Rashi says that it's for leather workers. The glue that we're talking about is not for books, it's for leather workers. So why say kolan shel svarim? Answers the Gemara, kolan shel ratzanim mibayle. It should have been talking about a person who's a ratzan, a person who works with leather. It really is this type of glue. Why does our Mishnah refer to it this way? Because the so from because people who would make books, they'd also use this kind of glue. They use it at the back for the binding. They use it to, however they use the glue, but it was the same kind of glue that they use. So the same glue, you go to the store. Can I please buy some glue for leather? And can I please buy some glue for book binding? Same glue. That's what the Gemara says. That's why our Mishnah was able to say it's kolan shel svarim and not kolan shel ratzanim, that it's glue for both. Our Mishnah said, Rabbi Eliezer, Omer Av Tachshit Enashim, 2 lines from the bottom, and Beis and Beis. It says that it was even for women's jewelry. What does that mean? Tachshit Enashim Sal Kadaitach. For jewelry, how can that be? Says the Gemara, La'ima Av Tipule Nashim. No, what Rabbi Eliezer was adding was what we were hinting to above, is something that was used for Tipule Nashim. To Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Rav, Benos Yisrael, turning to the top of Mem Gimel Amanav, if there were Jewish girls, Shehigiu Lepirkan, they had reached the age of development, but they were not really old enough yet. This is a reference to Shtei Saros. Rashi says at the top, Rashi says, so they've already hit some degree of development with body hair. They're embarrassed to have any hair on their body, so they want to remove the hair. So what they did is, if there were those who were less wealthy, so then they would use some type of line that would kind of burn the hair off of their body. Benos shirin, if they were wealthier, tovlos oson besoles. That's our case. We're talking about Pesach. It's flour. They would use some type of flour mix to remove the hair on their body, to remove whatever it was. They're removing hair on their body. Fine. Benos malachim, and just finishing out the idea. We already heard what we needed to hear because what Rabbi Eliezer was talking about was the soles. But let's finish out. Benos malachim, the wealthiest of the wealthy, the people who really just had everything, the kings, the princesses. What would they do? B'shem and Hamor, based on the, as we know, the pasuk in Megillah Esther, Shenemar Shisha Chodashim. Shemen Hamor, my Shemen Hamor. What is a Shemen Hamor? Rav Huna Bar Yirmiyah Omer Sateches. Rashi, he has no idea what this is. Rashi says, I can't even find it. Rashi says that he doesn't know what it is. Oh, there it is. 4th line. Lo Isparish. He doesn't know what it is. Apparently, Rashi elsewhere says he does know what it is. If you look in the Maseches Hashas, it says Uvimenachos, and Os Katan Zayin I have here. In the Maseches Hashas, it says Uvimenachos Pirish Rashi Shikoran Belisma. He at least gave it a name. Here he seems to say, I don't even know what we're talking about. So was that Rashi? Was it Rashi's sons? Okay, it's unclear, but we don't know what Sateches is. It's oil that was extracted from olives that only grew to 1/3 of their growth. Really, it was never edible for food. It was a different type of Shemen Hamor. It was a different type of thing. Fine. Tanya Rabbi Yehuda Omer on Piknin, another name for Shemen Hamor, because how do we know that? Because look at its definition. Shemen Zayis, well, exactly the same thing that Rabbi Yirmiyah said. So maybe it's the same thing as Shemen Hamor and Piknin are the same thing. But Lama Sachenoso, why did the Benos Malachim use this? Because on the one hand, it would remove unwanted hair, and at the same time, it was good for the skin. It would make the skin look very shiny, and that was considered appealing. Klal. We said in our Mishnah, we're about a quarter of the way down, 15 lines down, Mem Gimel Amid Aleph. Our Mishnah concluded with Zeh HaKlal, Kol Shemim in Dagan, anything that was from the Chameshes Minei Dagan. We said there that that's going to be Chayiv Kares. Well, that wasn't the language. It said you're over in Pesach, but we know that if you eat that, you're going to be Chayiv Kares. So it says the Gemara, Tanya, Amar Rabbi Yeshua, V'chi me'achar sheshaninu, Kol Shehu Minei Dagan, Harez over Pesach. Once you say that anything that has grains in it, you're going to violate the halachos of Pesach. Why all the details in our Mishnah? Lama manu chachamim aselu. Why did the Gemara say anything about Kutach Habavli, about Sheikh Hamadi? Why? Just tell me. And just tell me the rule. Tell me the rule. Don't tell me all the practical applications. I can figure it out. So it says the Gemara, not everyone can figure it out. So it says the Gemara, A person should know that which is regular. So that's why if a person is giving a shiur in Hilchos Pesach and they say a person should not use toothpaste, give examples. What kind of toothpaste are we talking about? Shabbos toothpaste, regular. Things change in the cultures, and when we teach, we have to give practical examples because otherwise people could miss things. They might think, well, this is an exception, lav dafka, and maybe you missed it, like this person in the story here. There was a person who lived in Eretz Yisrael. He went to Bavel, have a bisra bahadeh, and he brought meat with him. Like when people leave Chicago and they go places, they pack a suitcase of Romanian. I did this. I had a team meeting in Florida. I bought $100 of Romanian. We rented an Airbnb. I kashered the oven. We had a huge pastrami during the State of the Union. It was Givaldi. Okay, anyways, the Gemara says this person brought meat with him to Bavel. Amar lahu krivu li maskilta. And he says to the people, can you please bring me some maskilta? They misheard him. Shama deka amre krivu li kutach. They misheard. They brought him kutach. Kevan de shama kutach pirish. Oh, no. You can't give me kutach. Kutach is chametz. Kutach is chametz. That's not allowed. Fine. So that's why they gave the practical examples. It's chametz. It has flour in it. Oh yeah. Oh, it's true. It has nothing to do with Pesach. It's both. Thank you. It's milchik. That makes a lot more sense. Does Rashi say that? Is he talking about Pesach here? No, because they would never have brought him the kutach with chametz. They wouldn't have had it. It has to be milchik. Has to be milchik. What? But this was in Bavel. The case was in Bavel. So I know I'm just wrong. It's talking about milchiks. That's correct. Does Rashi say that, or I'm just? It's just obvious.
I thought it was obvious. Actually,
Yeah, Rashi says it.
Rashi said what? The what? Oh, Shabaki Haya Yoda Shesham. Perfect. That's Rashi. Yeah, 5 lines down. Okay, great. Thank you very much. So it says the Gemara that they wouldn't bring it to him.
You see a second shot?
What? Oh, yeah. Okay, it's either way. Yeah, I can't take credit for it. I didn't see that, Rashi. Okay, let's go. It says the Gemara that they wouldn't bring it to him. That's why it's good to give practical examples when you're giving shiur, because you want people to know what they're talking about. Hare elu be'azhara, that there's going to be a lav here. We're now going to enter into a very, very important sugya in Shas, and this sugya is about what about types of chametz that are not pure. It's not a piece of bread. It's a mixture. Now, we know that there is no bittul of chametz on Pesach, but what if there was a bittul of chametz before Pesach, 1 in 100, 1 in 1,000, whatever it is? So then we would say that taroves is maybe not chametz on Pesach. So we're not, what do we do with mixtures? What do we do with chametz noksha? Says the Gemara as follows. We are 1/3 of the way down Mem Gimel Amud Aleph. We're going to be analyzing some psukim here, analyzing some brisas. So let's focus and try to figure out what this Gemara means. Hare elu ba'azhara, that there is an isser d'oraisa by these things which are mixtures. Man Tana, who is the author that holds? The chametz dagan gamor al yidei taroves, that if you have one of the chameshes minei dagan that's al yidei taroves, that is part of a mixture, vin noksha be'enei belav, and that there's chametz noksha machlokas rishonim about chametz noksha. It's really probably some type of inedible. Maybe pasta would be a good example. Maybe it has to be even less edible than that. Pasta is actually chametz. It's actually chametz, but it's not really edible. So maybe it's that. Machlokas rishonim as to exactly what it means. But anyways, it's either a mixture or the chametz noksha, which is a slightly inedible version of chametz. Who is the author of our Mishnah to say that there's an isser d'oraisa? 2 shitas. Here's shita number 1. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Marav Rav Meir. It's a shita of Rav Meir. Where do we see that? Titania, we have a brisa. What is the brisa, right? Shiur, this is not seor, shiur yisaref. Rashi, an inch above where we are, shiur, he writes, Shaloni chametz kol tzorcho. It's really not fully leavened. We need to read the continuation of Rashi. This is because that's how it's pronounced.
I mean, the article says shiur.
It wasn't in the Mesivta. It actually said either way. I don't know.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, that was why I said it. But anyways, Rashi here highlights a machlokes here. We'll use that just to make sure in case I misread it. Rashi here continues in Dibur Maschel Siur Shalonis Chametz Kol Tzarcho Siur Plige B'Masnisin. There's a machlokes Rav Meir and Rabbi Huda. Rav Meir Kari Siur. The earlier part of the development of chametz is Es Shehichsifu Panav. It already changes color a little bit. Okay. V'zeu Tchilas Chimuto. He holds at that earlier stage in baking that's called chametz. But Rabbi Yehuda have a siur shehischil lisadek, when it begins to crack, when the bread begins to crack on the surface. That's a later phase in the cooking. Kvar sedakin dakin, lisadek kvar sedakin dakin, small cracks. Kikarne chagavim, like something similar to grasshoppers. Echad lekan aval. But Rabbi Yehuda argues about shechsifu panav, when it just starts to slightly change colors. He argues with Rabbi Meir and Rabbi Yehuda, that's still matzah. Well, Rabbi Meir, Karnei Chagavim is well past the line. Chametz Gomorhu. So the machlokas about shiur is whether or not this early part of cooking, of baking, is considered to be chametz, or is it still matzah? So now we can understand the Bryce and the Gemara. We asked our question, who is the shita who holds that chametz dagan gamor al yedei tarovis? You have a mixture of real chametz or chametz noksha. Who is the one who says there's nissa deraisa? It's Rav Meir. What does Rav Meir say? Titania, the Bryce writes, shiur yisarev, it should be burned. When something should be burned, we should assume an isser hana. V'nos no lekalbo. So you can also give it to your dog, which implies that there's no Isser Hana. So that's a steer minei. We'll dig into that in a second. The ha'ochlo be'arbaim. So the first and third statements, those make sense. The middle one seems to not make sense. Asks the Gemara, the obvious on this brisa. I don't understand. Agufa kasha. Amris se'or yisarei. You said that it should be burned. Alma aser behana. That implies if you have to do sreifa, it's Nisr Hana. And then the hadar tani v'nos no lifnei kalba that you can put in front of your dog. Alma muter behana. So what's pshat in the brisa? The brisa is very difficult. One line after the next doesn't make sense. Answers the Gemara halfway down. Mem Gimel Amad Aleph. Answers the Gemara Hachi Kamer. Here's pshat. Seir Yisarev de Reb Meir le Reb Meir to Rabbi Yehuda le Rabbi Yehuda. Within their own shitas, they agree, but they define Seir Yisarev differently. Remember what we said. Reb Meir says that Seir Yisarev is when it begins to change colors, and he says when they reach that level, Yisarev. And Rabbi Yehuda on his level, when it becomes a sedukim, when it gets the cracks like chagavim, he also agrees. So then that's Rabbi Yehuda, each one in their respective shitas. They're not agreeing with each other yet, they're still arguing. V'nos nalifnei kalbo de Rav Meir le Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda says that Rav Meir's standard of Sir Yisaref, I still hold as mutter. It's matzah. Because shehichsif was not enough to become chametz. According to Rabbi Yehuda, Rav Meir's standard isn't chametz, it's still matzah. So this is like a dig. The brisa throws in, and yeah, your thing about sreifa, Rav Meir, you can give it to the dog, no problem. There's no isser hana there. And then when the brisa says v'ha'ochlo be'arba'im asan the Rav Meir, when does the malchus come in? Not according to Rabbi Yehuda, because the way Rabbi Yehuda understood the part about the club, it's mutter be'ana because it's not chametz, it's matzah. So therefore, who says arba'im? That's only malchus arba'im. That has to be according to Rav Meir. So let's understand the sheet of Rav Meir. Let's extrapolate from this brisa and the way we asked and answered on this brisa to understand the answer to our question. Remember our question. We said, how do we know that chametz gamar al yedei tarov? I said, if you have real chametz, it's in a mixture. Or how do we know that chametz noksha has an isser lav to it? Sham'inan lei, halfway down. Sham'inan lei, the Reb Meir, noksha be'enei lav. It seems very clear that if you have noksha be'enei, it's full, it's right in front of you. You're making pretzels, whatever you're making, it's right in front of you, that there's a lav. And then says the Gemara, and adds in, it's not in the brisa this way, the kol shekain, all the more so, obviously, chametz dagan gamar al yedei taroves. According to Rav Meir, what's worse, chametz noksha or chametz dagan gamar al yedei taroves? So what? Whatever he said last. Yeah, the kol shekain. Pasha that one's going to be usher. So this is going to become very important for the continuance of our Gemara soon. Rav Meir's opinion, all of this is within Rabbi Yehuda Marav. Rabbi Yehuda Marav the Amora was quoting Rav Meir, and we found out the answer to our question that Rav Meir is the one who holds that there's a lav by chametz noksha, and then he says v'kol shekain all the more so by chametz gamor, which is in a mixture. So we'll come back to this soon, but he holds that chametz gamor, that chametz dagan gamor de tarobes, that the actual chametz that's in a mixture is more severe. Fine. That's approach number one, that to answer our question, where does the lav come from? Who is the one who taught us in our Mishnah that there's an Isser Daraisa to have Chametz Noksha, or to have Chametz Dagan Gamra Yedei Tarobes, the mixture of actual Chametz? That is Rav Meir. Rav Nachman Amar, no, different answer. Rabbi Eliezer, the Tanya, the Brisa writes, Al Chametz Dagan Gamur, pure Chametz, you're eating a piece of bread, Anush Kares, that's Mamish, the Pasuk. Al Iruvo Bilav Div Rabbi Eliezer. If you're eating a mixture thereof, that seems to be the Eruv case. You're talking about the Chametz Dagan Gamar de Tarobes. That case he holds as a lav. That's Rabbi Eliezer. So now we see our shita. We're going to finish the brisa though, and this sheet of the brisa we will conclude with at the end of the page, on the end of Mem Gimel Amud Beis before the end of the day. So just kind of bracket this off in your mind. V'chachamim omrim al chametz dagan gamor anush kares. They agree with, of course, but alei ruva below klum. But when it comes to a mixture of chametz, they're below klum. They say that there's no isser at all. We're going to discuss that at the end of the day today for our last sugya. Now, remember our question. We're at the first of the long signs, Vishaminan. But let's remember our question. We said, how do we know that there's an Isser Daraisa by a mixture of Chametz or by Chametz Noksha? Answers the Gemara, it's Rabbi Eliezer, who said that there's an Isser Lab. Vishaminan, like the Rabbi Eliezer, he says, the Amar Chametz Dagan Gomer al Yedei Ta'arovis Belab, The kol shekain noksha be'ene. He reverses the kol shekain. He says, yes, this brisa indicates explicitly that when there's chametz dagan gamar al yedei tarobes, that when there's a mixture of real chametz, so then we say, yes, there's a lav. But what's the kol shekain here? The kol shekain noksha be'ene. All the more so by chametz noksha. So this was a subtlety within each approach. In approach number one of Rabbi Yehuda Marav, the way he built the kol shekain is what's worse, noksha or ta'aroves? The answer was ta'aroves. Here, according to the second Amora, according to Rav Nachman, he says no, chametz noksha is worse than ta'aroves. So we're going to dig into that momentarily. Why did Rav Nachman? Why did they not say like each other? Machlokas Amoraim. Why didn't Rav Yehuda say like the second opinion of Rav Nachman? And why didn't Rav Nachman say like Rav Yehuda? Let's see. 2 lines into the wide lines, 2/3 of the way down. Rav Nachman, my time Rabbi Yehuda. Why didn't Rav Nachman, who said that we hold like Rabbi Eliezer, hold like Rabbi Yehuda? Because he says, Amar Lach Ad Kan, you were Amar Lach Dilma Ad Kan, perhaps Rabbi Yehuda Marav, when you quoted Rav Nachman, maybe Lo Amar Rav Nachman Asma Noksha Beine. Maybe Rav Meir was only talking about a case of Noksha Beine. Aval, maybe he wasn't even dealing with a case of Chametz Dagan Gamar Al Lo. How do you even know he was talking about that? I can't use your Rav Meir, says Rav Nachman. I can't use Rav Meir as a Mari Malcolm because we don't know if he was talking about both cases of Chametz Noksha and a case of Tarobes. Maybe he's only talking about Chametz Noksha. And the reverse, 4 lines down, wide lines. For Rav Yehuda, my time, Rav Nachman. Why didn't Rav Yehuda, who said like Rav Meir, why didn't he hold like Rav Nachman, who held like Rabbi Eliezer, where there's an explicit statement that there's an Isser law by Tarobes? So the answer is the Gemara, like we would have anticipated. Amar Lach. Ad Kan, maybe. Maybe Rabbi Eliezer was only talking about a case of Tarobas of Noksha Be'ene, but in the case of Chametz Noksha, this lower quality Chametz, Lo Amar, maybe he wasn't talking about that. So neither of them really have a slam dunk case because each of their Mari Makomos are somewhat questionable, and therefore they didn't hold like each other. They each held of their own. Rabbi Yehuda Marav said that we have the answer to our question, there's an Isser Lav by Tarobas and Chametz Noksha by looking at the Shita of Rav Meir. And Rav Nachman was of the opinion that we follow the Shita of Rabbi Eliezer, and each of them have their own pathways. 3/4 of the way down, we have a brisa. Going back to the sugya that I was foreshadowing a little bit, about which is worse, Chametz Noksha or a Tarobas of Chametz. Says the Gemara, Tanya Kabbasid Rabbi Yehuda. We quoted the Shita of Rabbi Yehuda Marav. Rabbi Yehuda Marav built his kol shekain that there's Noksha, and kol shekain, of course, there's going to be an Isser by the Tarobas, implying that the Tarobas of Chametz was worse than Noksha. What does the Brisa say to support this Shita? Rashi also says this explicitly. 10 lines, 12 lines from the bottom. He says, Amar Chametz Gamor B'Tarobas Chamor. He says there that we know that the Tarobas is worse. How do we know that that's true? Because, says the Brisa as follows. Kol machmetzes lo sochelu. The pasuk says, Kol machmetzes lo sochelu. L'rabos kuta chabavli v'sheichar amadi v'chometz adum v'zesemamisri. Now we can see an influence of the Brisa potentially on our Mishnah or vice versa. We don't know when this Brisa was written because we don't know when most Brisas are written without a name. So here it says that we need to include these things. You're not allowed to eat them. And remember, all of these are mixture cases. Kuta chabavli, sheichar amadi, chometz adomi. All of these are mixtures. They're our Mishnah. They're all mixtures. So it says the Gemara, Yachal Yehei Anush Kares. Maybe we would say that by Kuta Chabavli, V'chule, and the rest of the list in our Mishnah and in this Brisa that there's Isser Kares. Says the Gemara, no. Talmud Lomar, no, that's not correct. Ki kol ochel chametz v'nichrasa. Al chametz dagan gomer anush kares. V'ali ruvo bilab. So we have an explicit line here that says, when do we have the Isser Kares? That's when a person eats a chametz dagan gomer, it's pure, it's challah. It's mamish, you're eating challah. So pasha, that's going to be an Isser Kares. However, v'ali ruvo, where there's a mixture, so then bilab, you only get an Isser Daraisa. And whose shita was that? Man shamas le'damar ale ruvo bilav. Who's the one who said explicitly that a ruvo, that when there was a mixture of chametz, that it was bilav? Rabbi Eliezer he. Good. What's missing from this whole brisa? Noksha. Says the Gemara, ve'ilu noksha be'ene lo ka'amar. This brisa makes no reference to chametz noksha whatsoever. Shma mina. What do we see from this brisa? Noksha the Rabbi Eliezer lesle. Rabbi Eliezer doesn't even hold of chametz noksha in the world of Yisurim. It may be Yasser Mida Rabbanan. It may be Yasser for secondary reasons, but it's not the Isser Daraisa that we are talking about here. So what do we see from this Brisa? That we have an Isser Daraisa by chametz al yedei ta'aroves. Isser Daraisa. But nothing when it comes to noksha. So says the Gemara, therefore we support the Shit of Rabbi Yehuda Marav, who held that chametz al yedei ta'aroves is more chamor than chametz noksha. A beautiful raya from the Gemara. Says the Gemara, really, Rabbi Eliezer, I don't understand. A ruvo belav minole. Where does Rabbi Eliezer get his isser from Aviruva Balav? If you look in this brisa that precedes us, the one that we just saw, this line, we said that the pasuk says Al Chametz Dagan Gamor Anush Kares, and then the next line said Aviruva Balav. But how do you know that? Where's that from? Rabbi Eliezer Aviruva Balav Minole, says the Gemara, because Dichsid Kol Machmetzes Lo Sochelu. This pasuk, I'll read it in full. We're going to learn now two psukim in Perek Yud Beis. This pasuk is pasuk kaf. Good. So it says the pasuk that says the pasuk that that's how he knows that there's an Isser Lav. Perfect. Says the Gemara, Yihachi Karesh Nami Lechayev. Why is there no Isser Lav by the mixture? There should be. I'm sorry. Why is there only an Isser Lav by the mixture? There should also be an Isser Kares. How do you know that by the mixture of chametz that there's not going to be an Isser Kares? The Haksiv, after all, another pasuk writes, and this pasuk is pasuk Yud Tes, the preceding pasuk, Ki kol ochel machmetzes v'nichrasa. The previous pasuk speaks about Kares. So in pasuk Kaf it says you ate chametz there where you get the lav. In pasuk Yud Tes it says you get Kares. So how do you know that there's no Isser Kares over here in our case of Taroves? Says the Gemara, because you can't use that. Hahu mi baile lichadatanya. That pasuk of v'nichrasa is being used already in a brisa. What does the brisa say? Skipping the word machmetzes, the Meforshim take it out. Ein li ela shenis chametz me'ela. That's only when the bread leavens on its own. Machmas davar acher. What if it only rises for an external reason? Minayin talmud lomar kol machmetzes v'nichrasa. So the pasuk is unavailable to add the Isser Kares to the Tarovis. It's being used. You learned the Isser Lav by a Tarovis from the word machmetzes in pasuk Kaf. Why not an Isser Kares based on pasuk Yud Tes? Because pasuk Yud Tes is being used to teach you that there's an Isser Kares when a piece of challah leavens for external reasons and not just on its own. Yihachi, if that's true, says the Gemara, de lav nami lahachi u'da'asa. Says the Gemara, then maybe the case of Ta'aroves, we shouldn't have the lav used over there. We should have the lav for this case where chametz becomes chametz from an external factor. Says Gemara, no, that rejects his reason, and therefore Elatayim Rabbi Eliezer is for a different reason. It's from the word mikol. What word mikol? Going back to our pasuk that we were using already, that's pasuk kaf. The pasuk reads kol machmetzes lo sochelu. The word kol teaches us kol. There's even an Isser Lav even by a Ta'aroves. That's what the word kol means according to Rabbi Eliezer. Says the Gemara. But Hasam Nami in pasuk Yud Tes, it also says kol. I don't understand. Hasam Nami haksiv kol in the pasuk that speaks about kares in pasuk Yud Tes, it also says the word kol. Maybe we should say there's an Isser Kares by a Ta'aroves. Who says that there's only a lav? Says the Gemara, no. The word kol in pasuk Yud Tes is being used for something else and is not available to extend the Isser Lav and a Ta'aroves to the world of a Ta'aroves. Kol hahu mi baile, says the Gemara. The Rabbo says hanashim, to include women in the Isser Chametz. Why in the world would we need a pasuk for that? So we'll see now what the concern of the Gemara was. It says the Gemara, but wait a minute. Nashim, we know women are going to be chayavos for 10 reasons, but let's pretend we don't know anything about halacha. So it says Gemara tells 4 lines from that. Nashim, Rabbi Yehuda Marav Nafka. We learned that already. What did we learn about women? We learned it's a well-known Gemara. This Gemara is quoted all over Shas, and it says, "Damar Rabbi Yehuda Marav v'chein tanad beit Rabbi Shmuel Amar Kra Isha ki yas mikol chatos adam hish ve'hakas v'yishleisha l'chol onshin Shabbat Torah." What are you talking about? Women are exempt from chametz. You need a pasuk. The word kol and pasuk Yud Tes by Kari says to add in women by Dir chametz. What are you talking about? Women are always chayavos in mitzvos lo saseh. They're never exempt. I think literally never. When would they ever be exempt from a mitzvah that's a lo saseh? Says the Gemara, itzrich. Crazy. What does that mean, itzrich? What's the havamina? So says the Gemara, you might have thought the following. Top of Mem Gimel Amud Beis. Mem Gimel Amud Beis says this follows. What might I have thought erroneously? I might have thought, because the pasuk says, Lo sochal alav chametz, shivas yamim tochal alav matzos, that in the same pasuk, when it indicates the Isser chametz, it also indicates the mitzvah of matzah. What might I have thought? Kol sheyeshno b'kum echol matzah. Anyone who has a chiyuv to eat the matzah, yeshno b'val tochal chametz. And that's why we need the word kol. Because I might have made the incorrect assumption that the only people who are going to be chayav on the Isser of chametz are those who have a mitzvah deraisa by eating matzah. But it's a mitzvah saseh shazman grama, seemingly, right? Says the Gemara, the hani nashe, and these women, and because the only time you fulfill the mitzvah d'oraisa, according to most Rishonim, when you eat matzah is on the night of the 15th, after dark and before morning. very narrow scope of time. Mitzvah saseh shezman grama. So because the only way that a woman can ever fulfill that mitzvah is at night, therefore she's exempt. So havamina that she's also exempt from chametz as well. So says the Gemara, Ema bebal tochal chametz nami lesnu. Maybe we should say that she also doesn't have, just like she's exempt from matzah, she's also exempt from chametz. So says the Gemara, kamash mama. Crazy havamina in the Gemara. Crazy havamina. And then the Gemara goes on to the obvious. But now that we've learned a little bit, but now that we know that that's not true, we know that because of the word kol and pasuk yates, that a woman is chayeves in chametz, and she's not allowed to eat chametz. So then, we now know that a woman is obligated in achilas matzah per the sheet of Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer, Nashim chayavos b'achilas matzah davar Torah shene'emar lo sochal alav chametz v'gomer kol sheyeshno bebal tochal chametz yeshno be'achilas matzah v'hani nashe nami hol yeshno bebal tochal chametz yeshnon bekum echol matzah. Says the Gemara, we have a little domino effect because of the word kol. It undoes the havamina to say that maybe a woman would be exempt from matzah, would be pater, I should say pater from the world of chametz because she's a mitzvah shezman grama. It's not that way. She's chayeves in chametz and therefore she's chayeves in matzah. Says the Gemara, but the way you use the word kol was a little bit strange. The word kol is to include women. Why is it that you chose, when the word said kol, why did you choose to take the word kol and say, from there we're going to learn that women are chayavos in the isser of matzah, when you could have learned out that someone who ate a ta'arovas of chametz is chayav kares? Like, how did you choose between the two? I've shared this before. My Rebbe said this is one of the hardest parts of Shas, of understanding Psukim. How did the Chachamim decide what to include with the word kol? How did they figure it out? So we'll see here a slight pecking order of how to choose what, at least a general direction of what drasha to use. Answers the Gemara, maybe it should come to include the Isser of Erev that it's Bekares. So when there's a Tarovis of Chametz, there's an Isser Kares. Mistabra, Kai be'ochlin, this is Gemara's answer. Mistabra, it makes sense to say Kai be'ochlin, mar be'ochlin. Then when we're talking about those who eat the food, it's then reasonable to include other people who are eating the food. Kai be'ochlin, when you're talking about those who eat the food, mar be'ne'echalin, you're going to start talking about the Isser of what they eat. The Torah is speaking about who's not allowed to eat it. And you're like, by the way, Isser kares on tarovas. We're not talking about that. We're talking about who. We're not talking about what. We're talking about people. We're not talking about the product. So then that's why the Gemara says you stick to the topic at hand. So when we say the word kol, look at the pasuk. The pasuk says over here, kol machmetzes lo sochelu, you're not allowed to eat it. You people, you're not allowed to eat it. L'rabos what? To include women. So that's why the Gemara says we're sticking to the topic at hand. Says the Gemara, wait a minute. Maskefler of Nasan, we're 1/3 of the way down, Mem Gimel Amud Beis, a little bit more, almost halfway down. Maskefler of Nasan Avua de Rav Huna. He says, there's no precedent in learning out Psukim that we start out talking about a person and we end up talking about a product. Of course, there's precedent for that. Tanya, the Brisa writes, Kikol ochel chelev min abei masher yakriv. When we talk about eating chelev, Kikol ochel. You cannot eat that food. We're talking about a person. Then comes along the drasha. We're talking about the what now? We're talking about the product. There, says the Gemara. What do we see here? We started talking about people, ochel, don't eat, and we ended up talking about balei mumin and chelev chulin. Now we're not talking about people anymore. We're talking about product. So you broke your own rule. You wanted to say the reason why the word kol implied nashim and not an extra isser by a tarovas of chametz is because we were talking about people. So let's continue talking about people. Kol means women. It doesn't mean eruv. It doesn't mean a tarovas. But that's not true because in the case of chelev, that wasn't true. We see that by chelev, we started out with ochlin and ended with ne'echalin. Answers the Gemara, 2/3 of the way down. Hasam. In that case of the chelev, deleka ochlin. There are no more people to include in the isser. It's an Isser Klali. Everyone's Usser in Chelev. There are no Heterim. There's no Havamin at all to exclude anyone from Chelev. Therefore, we moved on to the next available category, Marbanei Chol and other foods. We're done with the people. Now we're on to the product. But hacha, in our case, we weren't sure because there was a havamina that if a woman is exempt from matzah because it's a mitzvah sheshman grama, havamina, then maybe she's also exempt from the connectedness of chametz. Therefore, we need the word kol. By chaylev, there's no other people to include. So we left the category of people and used the words in the pasuk to include the what? The product. But hacha, in our case, the ika ochlin, there were people who were eating the lo shavik lahu leochlin umar b'nechalim. Lo shavik, sorry. Hacha, the ika ochlin, here there are more people to talk about. There's nashim. Then lo shavik lahu leochlin. We're not going to ignore those people to go add an extra drasha and speak about an extra issue that relates to taroves. Umar b'nechalim, we're not going to do that. Good, beautiful. Last sugya for the night. V'rabbanan to leslahu eru. Remember, we said it in the brisa, 2/3 of the way down in Mem Gimel Amud Aleph. We said, I'll read the line again. It's the two short lines before the wide lines. Mem Gimel Amud Aleph. I'll read their sheets in full. The Chachamim said, Al chametz dagan gamor anush kares al eruba below klum. They said that the Isser Daraisa with kares applies to chametz dagan gamor. Correct? But al eruva below klum. They said there's no Isser Daraisa by tarovis of chametz. Let's analyze that shita. Says the Gemara, V'Rabbanan, the rabbis, the leslahu eru, they who say that there is no Isser Doraisa by tarovis of chametz. Why not? Where did Rabbi Eliezer learn that from? The word kol. Well, what about you? You don't learn the word kol? That's correct. Kol lo darshe. They don't make that same drush as Rabbi Eliezer. But if you're not dorish the word kol, then there's another ripple effect. Nashim. That was from the next pasuk. But if you're not dorish the word kol, so then we have a problem. It's a side effect. Elanashim inalahu. We learn from Parak Yud Beis Pasuk Yates Kol that nashim are chayavos in matzah and chayavos in chametz. So where do you learn that from? Kol lo darshe. He says, yeah, you're right. I'm not dorish the word kol, but when it says ki and kol, I am dorish. A whole new level of nuance. Ki kol darshe. So that's what the Gemara answers. Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer, what about you? We know that you learned out that nashim are from the word kol, and the isser lav is from the word kol as well. But if you have the extra word of ki, then maybe we should add the Isser Kares to the person who eats a taravas of chametz. Rabbi Eliezer, Ema kol l'rabos nashim, ki kol l'rabos esei ruvo. Maybe we can have everything, all the Isser, we included women with the word kol. We got the Isser lav of a taravas of chametz with the word kol. We have an extra word for ki. We know why the Rabbanan use the word ki, because they're not dorish the word kol. So they take the word ki and they say the only way that women are included in the Isser of chametz and masa is by the word ki kol. But if there's an extra word of ki, Rabbi Eliezer should use it to add the Isser of Kares to taravas of chametz. And if you want to say that ki kol, that Rabbi Eliezer is not dorish ki kol, Rabbi Eliezer lo dorish, that's not true. The Tanya, the Brisa writes, let me read this correctly. The pasuk says, kol mincha asher takrivu l'Hashem lo se'aseh chametz ki chol se'or v'chol devash lo saktiru mimenu yishel Hashem. You're not allowed to add to the Torah. You're not allowed to add chametz. You're not allowed to add honey. So it says the Gemara se'or ba'al saktiru ein li ela kulo. I can't add all of it in, not kol. Miksasa minayin, partially is that usher as well. Tamalomar kol. A ruvo minayin, a mixture, is that allowed? Tamalomar ki kol. Man shamasle de dorish kol, Rabbi Eliezer. The kadarish ki kol. We see here that he is dorish ki kol. Kashya. And the Gemara ends with that. We end with this misunderstanding of Rabbi Eliezer. We don't know how this works. Remember, the Rishonim say that a kasha is not a teku. A kasha means you have to work harder for the answer. A teku means we really don't know what the answer is. We'll stop right here. Picking up Tamar and Emir Sashem from Amar Rabbi Abba, 6 lines from the bottom of the Gimel Amud Beis. Wishing you all a beautiful night.
Oh, yeah.